Hello and welcome. This is episode 7 of a podcast, Engineer-to-Manager. My name is Alex Maestrenko. I'm a podcaster and advisor to CDTO here in Kyiv City Council. In this podcast, we are diving into the essence of engineering management. We explore what engineering management is and what are the challenges and opportunities. For this journey, I invite experienced engineering managers from different parts of the world. Today's guest is from Spain, Carlos Sanchiz. Hello, Carlos. How are you doing?
Hey, Alex. Good to see you. Very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for accepting the invite. Happy to have you here. You're a head of startup at Amazon, focusing on EMEA South. You've also been working at AWS since 2020, so more than the last 10 years, and in different roles, including solution architect, system engineer, and what we will definitely talk about, manager of solution architects, and now you're in this new role. I also listened to several of your topics and your speeches, mostly in Spanish, and they sound very passionate. There, from the topic, I understood that you talk about cloud and digital transformation. Very nice. Is it correct? Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very correct. I joined Amazon a long time ago, so I'm a long-term, what we call here an old fart, a long-term Amazonian. Actually, I joined in the retail side of the house. So I was working in a startup called VIP, and we were doing flash sales in the internet. Actually, we were competing with Amazon, and things were working very well, so much so that Amazon decided to acquire the organization and also land operations in continental Europe, which back in that day we didn't have. I started as a systems engineer in retail, working into as you can guess, a lot of high scale, high complex systems and architectures. Mm-hmm. And I was also helping other subsidiaries that Amazon was acquiring around the world to integrate it into Amazon, elevating their security standards, and basically be more efficient. That's what I did at the beginning. And then in 2014, I moved to AWS, the moment that we started landing those operations in across Europe. First as a solutions architect.
Before we go to the solution architect, let's focus a little bit about system engineer, because I'm not sure all of our listeners are familiar with that role. Can you describe what do you guys do as a system engineer?
Yeah, so I think that role has evolved over time, and it's more right now. It's more what we will call like a DevOps engineer, someone that works more on the pure operations, automations, making sure that the infrastructure is is working efficiently. I used to do a lot of what we call now site reliability, like building resiliency into systems, right? Also security in an automated way, so SecOps right now. But yeah, I think that this has evolved into more of a DevOps, thanks to the cloud in many ways, right? Because now many of the things that I used to do more manually and more on my own with the scripting and different programming languages, now you can do it very API driven. With many different programming languages. So yeah, I think that's a fairly accurate description.
So basically, this role doesn't exist anymore. Do I hear this correctly, or has transformed into DevOps or something else?
I guess in the old guard, it's still over there, but people like to call it many different ways. At the end of the day, so you have the people that are more focused on the software development, more creating those applications, and people that are like the plumbers. And I'd like to see the systems engineer making sure that, security patching of the services, making sure that you have, your systems scale, making sure that you have your firewalls in place, all these kind of things, right? So I don't say that they don't exist. I say that you may hear or see them with a different title.
Okay, because I think they still work, and I had several at my previous position where we delivered services for enterprises that are still run on-premise hardware stack. And then basically their system engineers back then were kind of updating the systems, deploying their changes, deploying the patches, deploying new functionality, configuring networks, HSMs, all those kind of things. So kind of more network, systems, system engineers, which was a little bit far away from me from DevOps. Because do you think that DevOps should be a part of a culture, and everybody, including software engineers, should also kind of understand and know it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, you need to have all the teams working collaboratively and making sure that every piece of the stack is working efficiently and well interconnected with the other parts. So one doesn't work well without the other, right? I remember when I started working in tech more than 25 years ago. Oh my gosh.
Time flies.
Yeah, time flies. I used to do a lot of that in a data centers, like even patching cables into the servers, racking the servers, making sure that we have all those connections set up. I mean, just look at how you do it now. You just click a button and you get like hundreds of servers completely configured and all set up to do whatever you want to do.
But there is still hardware behind it, right? And people who maintain that hardware. So it's not as easy as it looks below their surface, right?
Yeah. I mean, there is we say in serverless, there are servers behind them, right? So there is a lot of stuff behind, but much of the operational work and the undifferentiated heavy lifting is taken care of by the cloud provider in our case, that's for sure. So you can focus on your differentiated heavy tasks, like what differentiates you from as a business, right? Instead of patching those servers, installing or racking those servers, taking care of the hardware, that doesn't add any value to you as a business, right? So it's just phenomenal. That's why the cloud has been so transformational. Nobody wants to spend time in those stacks anymore because they just want to focus on the business and move quickly.
So basically, with a system engineer in mind, you then moved to the architect role. Did it happen naturally, or why did you decide? Is it a path for everyone?
Yeah. So in my case, was a personal preference because I had been using for personal projects the cloud, kind of basically AWS and EC2, and I was astonished. I mean, I was so impressed because I was coming from that time where I had to basically talk to the hardware provider and ask for a server, provision a lot of money up front. And maybe if I was lucky, I could get a server in 3 months. But then I have to rack it myself. I had to configure it, install of the software, etc., etc. And all of a sudden, I have a service that I can pay by the hour anywhere in the world, and I can spin up as many servers as I may need. And when I don't need it, I just get rid of them, right? So I was so sure that was going to be the future. I was happy because I was at Amazon. So it was just a matter of time that I was going to have that opportunity to jump.
So internally, you also saw the things, obviously, and you were happy with how they work internally, because sometimes the external picture and the internal differ.
Yeah.
And if you decided to continue this way, it looks like it was very good situation internally, which sounds great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, AWS is basically solving Amazon's problems because Amazon, for example, was struggling with managing all this infrastructure in an efficient way. So we were trying to scale our operations, especially the time for our developers. They were spending a lot of time in undifferentiating heavy lifting tasks, and we wanted to improve. So basically, we came up with the idea of launching AWS, and we also knew for a fact that if Amazon had that problem, many other businesses out there were going to have that problem. We're going to benefit from this kind of self-service infrastructure stack. So basically, I did is just when I just jumped on board. At that point, the team in Spain was very, very small, so I had the opportunity to work with many different customers, including enterprises, startups, partners, all kind of customers that were trying kind of revolutionize the industry. They were the pioneers. They wanted to use this super novel cloud technology that nobody was familiar with to disrupt different industries. So that's was the early days of AWS for me, which was very demanding because everybody wanted to talk to us and to use our services. And we didn't have the structure that we have today, but also a kind of a life learning experience. I learned so much. I was moving from engineering to more sales, business oriented track. So I had to learn a lot in that regard. But yeah, I wouldn't change it for anything. It was a great experience.
And when you moved from system engineering to architecture, did you stop coding, or you were not coding but doing hands-on job? Because we know architects are typically working in PowerPoints, producing tons of slides, and there are lots of talks, but no real output in terms of code or delivery, and there something working. Did it change for you as well? Is it a correct perception of the role?
Yeah, so one thing that really changed that took me a while to realize and to adapt to is that I was not working on production code. I was not working on production systems. So everything that I do or that I did was to prepare to showcase to customers what they could do with AWS. And that sometimes meant that I had to code some scripts and some infrastructure code snippets and things like that. But of course, I also needed to show them the art of the possible, right? And sometimes that means sharing some slides to talk about use cases, to talk about customer stories, to talk about how high level how the systems and the services work from AWS. But yeah, I still remain very hands-on. I still had to use AWS in the console and scripting on a daily basis, because I would engage not only with the C-suite or the business decision makers, but also with the developers and with the DevOps engineers. So they would ask me questions, technical questions. How do I do this? Or what is the best and most efficient way to deploy my infrastructure? And I would just work with them. Sometimes I even share my code. Hey, maybe you can try this code and adapt it to your own code and give it a go, right? But yeah, I stopped working on production, which is a really important change. That's for sure. But that didn't mean that I was hands-off. No, not at all. I was just working in a different capacity.
Okay. Well, basically with AWS, I really admire your reference architecture diagrams, which you have open on your website with all different architecture, lots of things to learn from. And basically this brings me to the thinking that you're, as an architect, as far as I understand, you learn their concepts, you learn the design principles, but you don't go really deep inside into their language or frameworks, but rather you understand the principles and adapt those principles to every, let's say, you go to GCP, you go to AWS, and you go to Azure, because they have the same principles, right? Cloud providers, but just different names for services. Is it a correct perception?
Yeah, so we work in many different capacities with customers. What you see, for example, in the website, we try to standardize following, similar principles and our well-architected framework to make sure that your applications and your architectures are resilient, scalable, secure, cost-efficient, and sustainable, right? So at the end of the day, that's kind of the baseline. But then we have a group of solutions architects, like my team, that can work more closely with each and every customer that is trying to develop on AWS, right? And we can maybe go into the specifics and more detailed technology things. Like I don't know, maybe you have your own data center and your own infrastructure, and you want to connect both worlds, and we can put in place some direct connections, and maybe we start deploying applications or scaling, kind of overflowing into the cloud, where you can grow as much as you want, and then give up all that compute capacity when you don't need it anymore, right? So it's a matter of working with customers in whatever they need at the specific moment, because sometimes they are focused on many other things, and they kind of ask us to stay away for a little while. They need to take care of their own stuff. But some other times they just can work with whatever is kind of the default recommendation and the best practices, which is available for anybody.
Yeah, because the saying, the devil is in the details, and then when you go to a very concrete case, and there all the details suddenly pop up, which are drastically differ from what you have in the reference or in the books, and then you have to really dive into deeply. Talking about the architect, there is a very good book from your colleague, enterprise strategist at AWS, Gregor Hopp. I hope I pronounce his name or surname correctly, called their Software Architect Elevator, redefining their architect's role in their digital enterprise. And are you familiar with the book?
I am not, and I know. I mean, I've been seeing him talk. I don't know if in social media or internally at Amazon, but I know he works with different enterprises. At the end of the day, there are many things that we can do to these big organizations to help them transform their culture and the way they operate to get the best out of the cloud.
Because in the book here, kind of lays the levels of where architect works, and there basically says that the architect connects all those levels, and some of them are very similar to what manager does. For instance, connect business and IT strategy, drive change, conquer complexity, explain, demystify, and excite, design internet scale systems, remove friction, and keep up. Well, basically, like if we go from down, keep up, remove friction is a very good manager's description position as well, right? Because as a manager, you also have to do those things. Design internet scale systems, well, typically not, but you support whatever is designed by the team, right? Then explain, demystify, excite. It's not only about the software that you have to explain, but it's also about their team and the processes and their a goal that you are doing. You have to explain and demystify to people outside of the team, kind of explain what team is doing, and inside the team, like what the hell is company doing? Why we're building this small software or small piece? And then drive the change, because manager is also kind of looking where the team evolves and drive the changes. What do you think about it? Does it ring a bell for you, or is it kind of very far away?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I personally had the opportunity to work with enterprises in the past, like well-established companies. And those companies sometimes require a kind of a holistic and more strategic approach for the transformation journey, right? And their digitalization. And I understand that the solutions architect there has to wear many different hats at the same time. And, so many of our conversations with enterprises always started with, is the cloud secure, right? I can just go downstairs to my basement where I have my data center and I can touch my servers. True. And that's security for me, right?
There is a cable, I can plug it off if there is an attack, and that's it.
Absolutely. Exactly, right. So yeah, there is a journey that every enterprise has had to go through to just use the cloud and to benefit from the cloud. Startups, for example, don't have that kind of problem because they are burning in the cloud, and they just don't see any way of running their operations, right? Any option to go to an on-premises infrastructure would be kind of way backwards and would be making them less competitive, right? So for an enterprise architect, I think those considerations are really, really important. For the startup architect that is part of my team specifically, probably we can focus a little bit more on other topics like, how we move as quick as possible. What is the technology that I have to use to disrupt this industry? All these kind of things, right? But at the same time, it really depends on the customer's journey, because all startups are in a different moment of their journey. Some of them maybe just getting started. They just want to put an MVP out there and get traction and a feeling of feedback from the customer if they've missed something important, things like that. And some other customers are already scaling because they are being very successful and they want to be going global, and the problems are completely different, right? So the solutions architect in my team has to face those kind of challenges, right? So how we adapt to the customer needs at that specific moment and move as quickly as possible, which is probably the most important thing for startup customers.
Okay, so you basically, but well, I'm just curious. You said you worked with enterprises and now you work with startups at your current position. Why did you decide to abandon kind of the world of enterprise and go to a different side of the world?
Well, so when I joined AWS as a solutions architect, I had the opportunity to get both worlds at the same time, right? I was working with, one day I was meeting someone from this big bank in Spain, talking about, security in the cloud, for example. And the next day I would be meeting someone in Barcelona with a revolutionary idea in a public space. They didn't have any funding at all. And we were discussing about how they could be their MVP very quickly, right? So I understood the pros and cons. And one of the things that I liked so much about startups is that there is not a lot of politics or processes. They are scrappy. They like to move fast. So one day you talk about one architecture or one potential solution to their problem, and they have implemented the next week. Whilst in enterprise customers, maybe this could take months, if not years, right? If
months just for approval, right? It's not for implementation, it's just for approval and all the formal processes.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the things that I love so much about startups is that you can really influence their roadmap and help them be successful. And they move really, really fast. So there is a quick return of your investment, right? In terms of time and dedication. Which, I guess there are other pros and cons from working with enterprises. But I guess in this moment, when I took this decision in my career, I wanted to go more into speed and innovation.
But do you think that, basically, with their enterprise, you kind of feel more stable and they're more forecastable where it goes, where startups are kind of hard in the sense of they are unstable. They haven't the funding, as you mentioned, one of their examples, and they are also trying to find their niche, right? So the idea is there, but will it work? Will it fly? Yes or no? Do you support them in going through this barrier of hardness of kind of evolving and how do you do that? If you can share.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, we want to be successful as a company based on that customer success. So we want to build those relationships with our customers that are going to outlast us all. So we just want them to use only what they need to use at that specific moment and nothing more, right? So one of the goals that we have in the team is to make sure that all the customers that we work with are cost efficient, that they're not spending $1 more than what they need, right? Especially, during these times, we have an economic crisis, global instability. So all the customers that we work with, all those startups, are trying to optimize their runway because they don't know if they're going to have funding in the next round, right? So that's what we do. That's, just by using the cloud, we are much more efficient because of the economies of scale that you have and the efficiencies that you can achieve. Just a reminder, you just pay for what you use, right? And when you don't need anything, you just set the systems and you stop paying, right? So that's very convenient for startups, right? Also, my team specifically, we look into, through those conversations with them, with the customers and working very closely with them, we look into ways, kind of thinking out of the box, how to optimize their use of the cloud. Sometimes they are using something some specific service that is based on a specific technology. And then, people in startups are very busy and probably are doing a lot of jobs at the same time. So we come up to them with different ideas. Hey, maybe if you use this other technology or this other architecture, you can achieve these other efficiencies, right? And just by using the cloud and the pace of innovation that we have at Amazon, you can very easily adopt new efficient technology like our Graviton chipsets that we released frequently, right? So ARM-based chipsets that are more efficient. You can do much more with less. So at the end of the day, it's just a way of operating. So we don't have any specific goal. We don't do this for this quarter or for this year. We work with customers on an ongoing basis to make sure that they are the most efficient as possible using AWS.
It's interesting to hear the aspects that you are talking about, and what you don't like about your current role or about your current position and the working with startups. Because I definitely hear what you like, to see the result of your work, of your team, and help people to kind of grow their business, to make the impact. But is there something that you don't like?
Yeah, and I get this question a lot because I do a lot of interviewing, and candidates want to know, right? Not everything is perfect, right? But based on my own experience, and I've been here for over 12 years, you can guess that there are not so many things that I don't like, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't be here anymore. But yeah, when you're part of a big organization like we are right now at Amazon, you are part of a big, well-oiled machine, and that means there are processes, there are mechanisms, and you cannot bypass those. And sometimes, even if you don't like them, right? So some of them, sometimes I'm not so 100% super happy about them, but I still have to execute them and follow through. But I'm good with it. I mean, if I look at the overall picture, everything is overly positive. I mean, everything from the company culture to the opportunities that I have and my team has as a professional, because at the end of the day, we're working with customers that are changing the world that we live in, right? With people that are revolutionizing the way we order things online, or the way we move around with, asking for a
but they also, I can imagine a situation where you work with a customer, with a startup, they have a nice idea, and then one day they fail. Well, it happens, right? With lots of companies. And then do you feel kind of empty or frustrated about their time and money that you've invested in that company, obviously as a part of your job? And then basically, do you feel that you also failed as a part of the team?
No, not at all. I mean, we learn a lot of experiences. We look at failure at Amazon is a great place to fail. That's one of the things that I like about our culture. So company-wise, we push people to make failures, to innovate. And if you're not making failures, you're just not innovating enough, or you're not taking enough risks, right? So that's the way we approach innovation, which is phenomenal. I mean, I've failed so many times I lost count in this organization. But as long as I take the learnings, as long as we iterate on those learnings, we're fine with it, and we want to keep pushing the envelope. Regarding startups, I mean, the vast majority of the startups are going to fail. That's a fact. That's how this works, right? And if you are in my team, in the startups organization within AWS, you have to be comfortable with that, knowing that you're going to be putting a lot of work sometimes on projects and in companies that are not going to be there maybe next year or 5 years from now, and it's okay. Of course, I mean, we have to be business wise, and we have to kind of put most of our effort in the companies that are going to be successful, right? But still, I mean, everybody is a customer, and we need to take care of them. As I said at the beginning, at every single point of their journey, they may have different needs, right? For example, when we start working with an early stage startup, we may not be working on a super scalable, super resilient, 100% secure architecture, because they just want to put something very quickly out there. But when they move to a scaling, then we put a little bit more effort and we kind of look at every single detail of the architecture because they want to go global and they want to scale to millions of customers, right? So our investment has to be also smart, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, and also then take care about their compliancy, that you're compliant with all the regulation around their world in those countries where you work. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, so basically what you're saying is that it's a part of a precondition to join this team to make sure that, you're open to a failure and kind of working on something that you have to throw as a result, but get their experience that you gained with this or that startup that didn't fly. Well, as you said, this happens a lot.
Yeah,
Nice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, is our environment, is the world that we live in startups.
You mentioned already several times your team. Let's talk about your leadership role and your team. And can you describe how did you move to a leadership position? Because we talked about going from an engineer to architect, which sometimes already are a huge jump for people, right? Kind of going from implementing to thinking about the big scale. And then you're also at that big scale go to kind of a very different, for me, aspect. Managing not systems, but people. How did it happen?
Yeah. So in my case, it was very natural. So as part of Amazon's performance management and yearly reviews, we had conversations around career development. And I was having this conversation back in 2017, if I'm not mistaken, with my manager, and he suggested that I would explore the manager path because I had certain skills. I had built that level of trust among the team and reputation for the last 20 years, also in the industry. So it was a good moment maybe to explore it if I wanted to, right? So that's what I did. He gave me a small team at the beginning, and I could still do a little bit of individual contributor role aligned with a manager role, which, by the way, I don't suggest you do that because at the end of the day, you don't do well either or both. I suggest that you set a deadline and you transition fully to your new role. But yeah, long story short, I started working with my former peers, kind of colleagues, right? And I enjoyed it so much that I realized I had found my other passion apart from technology, right? Which was people management, helping others develop themselves and bring the best possible self to the job, right? And that's what I've been doing ever since. At the beginning was, as I said, a little bit cumbersome because, I was bringing along with me a lot of the IC things that I used to do. And I had to build a lot of skills that I didn't have for people managing. But yeah, as I said, Amazon was willing to take that risk with me and to bet on my progression. And I was able to just learn from my mistakes and keep developing, right?
Nice.
So much so that at some point I started transitioning to manager of managers. And I've helped other individual contributors transition to managers in my team, which was another great experience, right? With a different set of challenges. Add on top of that, a little bit of my team is scattered all over 3 continents, which adds some complexity. And that's the role that I hold right now. I have a team of solutions architects that work with the startups in Africa, Middle East, and Europe. And yeah, I basically have to take care that all the team is focused on customers, right? And we do what is best for customers' objectives.
You already described all your evolution, and let's dive into it into pieces. So first, you said you had there some skills, and one of them was trust that you mentioned. Definitely, trust is, I would say, one of the most important things to kind of establish a culture. But what do you think other 3 important things there? Person who is willing to transition from engineer to manager has to have?
Yeah, specifically for architects, I would say that you need a very strong and solid technical background. maybe in one specific domain, but you have to be very, very solid into that and have a certain level of depth. So basically, not only, for example, understand the software layer of this architecture or of this domain, but understand the software, the hardware, and everything underlying. That's super, super important, right? I think at least for me, one of the skills that also played an important part was communication skills. When you are a manager, you have to work with many different stakeholders. Sometimes those are from different countries or from different continents. Sometimes they are more business oriented. Sometimes they are more sales oriented. Sometimes more technical. So you have to be ready to adapt your message and to convey your message to any kind of audience, right? On top of that, you have to earn the trust with that communication skills with the people in your team. Sometimes it's going to be individual contributors, but sometimes it may be another manager, like is in my case right now, right? So that's super important. And lastly, I think if I had to pick one, is adaptability. So you have to be ready to move very quickly and to adapt to any situation, because when you are managing teams, and the larger the team, the more chances, it's just a matter of time, you're going to have trouble, you're going to have problems and emergencies, right? So you have to be able to shift priorities quickly, adapt quickly to whatever the business problem is, and just push through.
Okay, nice. You mentioned several times that you have people from different countries, continents. You work with people from different countries, continents. Obviously, all people are different, and we respect all of them. And every nation, every person has a specific character. Well, people from the south, they are more expressive, whereas people from the north are more close, and you have to pick different messages and different methods to bring them information you would like them to hear. Are there any techniques, tricks that you are using? And what possibly there was some interesting case with somebody from a country that you can share?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a problem that I face every day, because on top of that cultural bias, because I'm a white male, Spanish from Europe, that's my bias, my personal bias. But then on top of that, you have personal bias. So you have people that are more introvert, some are more extrovert. So it is a huge mix in my team that I have to constantly learn and constantly try to overcome, to be fair, right? So first and foremost is to be aware. The first thing is to get familiar with all these biases that are there. Get to know your team. Show yourself approachable, humble, and vulnerable. That would be another technique, because at the end of the day, we are still all humans. We are still fighting our own challenges and battles. And we can do with a little bit more of kindness, right? So if we can start those communications and those relationships with that foundational aspects, I think that goes a long way, and you are starting the right foot, right? Then look, everybody in my team is different, and they have, I have people that are more into their senior years of their professional career, but we have more kind of early career talent as well, right? That have basically come out of school, and some others are midway, right? So you have to understand where they are in their specific journey and what they want to achieve, not only in the long term, but also short term and mid term, right? So you as a manager, and I ask this to my managers as well, with that level of awareness, you can bring opportunities to them and reach out, for something meaningful. Like, hey, I thought you wanted to have more exposure in the media. Why don't we put you in this project, and you're going to be able to meet people like Alex and do some podcasting over there, things like that, right? So I think everything comes to a good communication across the team. And as a manager, you need to be very aware of yourself and the people that you work with and what their ambitions are.
Good. And there, you also mentioned that when transitioning from IC to manager role, you brought some of your habits from IC, and as I understood, they were not their best fit for the new role. Can you share what were the hard parts that you had to kind of abandon when you moved from IC to a managerial role?
So let me share two of them, because I think they were the two that I struggled the most with. So the first one was that, my team was already very stretched. Everybody was too busy. We were understaffed a little bit. We couldn't hire fast enough. We had a lot of work and a lot of pressure to kind of deliver outputs. So I thought that I could still do a lot of IC work to try to help my team and, just not to put more burden, because they are losing an individual contributor. They're losing a peer. So they're going to have to take more on their backs, on their shoulders now. So that doesn't work, because all of a sudden they lost a peer and they don't have a manager because he's too busy doing individual contributor stuff, right? So what I would suggest is that when you do that is because when you move to a manager is because there is a need for a manager, someone to put more strategy, someone to put more time and effort into operationalizing processes and things like that, right? Then the second one is
so basically their idea would be to, if you move, get your hands away from their work that you're used to, because I've heard different things about managers doing work in sense of engineering work. Some saying like, well, I never did and I'm not doing engineering work. Some say like, okay, you have to still keep your hands dirty a bit, and for instance, take something that is not on the critical path, that you can work in your with your velocity, that the team doesn't depend on right now. Obviously, what you're saying is kind of take their burning potato and try to handle it. That doesn't work for sure. That doesn't work. But kind of take their fruit that is already there, that nobody cares about or nobody wants to do as well, because there are more critical things on the table.
Yeah, so definitely you need to help the team prioritize a little bit better. And your job sometimes as the manager is going to say very clearly what we are not going to do. Which is probably very tough, but yeah, that's your role, and you have to take on that prioritization role, right? But I'm not saying that you shouldn't, wrap up your sleeves and get hands-on, get your hands dirty, but don't do it as you were doing it as an individual contributor. You have to be ready to do that whenever the time is necessary. But you have to adapt and you have to move to your new capacity and let the individual contributor stuff be the exception, not the rule, right? That would be
if you want to do some IC role, or it's your private project, weekend work, whatever you can imagine of, that's their work day, as I could say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be my approach if I were to do it again, right? The other element that took me a while to realize is that I could do very, very little on my own. I used to be very solid individual contributor. I could deliver a lot of kind of things on my own. I was very independent, very autonomous. That was the way I was used to work. And I was very comfortable. That was my comfort zone, right? And all of a sudden, my projects, the scope of my projects expanded, the complexity expanded. I no longer could do everything on my own. I depended on many different functions, many different teams, and of course, my own team, right? So it took me a while to realize that I had to put in place mechanisms like touching base on my one-to-ones with my team, on specific projects and specific asks that we had as a team, and make sure that I don't try to do them myself, but influence others to deliver themselves, right? So I would say that probably those were the two biggest learnings that I had from that transition.
That's very similar. The second one is very similar to mine, actually, because one of the things that I realized earlier in the transition from IC to a managerial role is that you can achieve more with a team, right? Compared to you being IC, you can be a brilliant developer, you can be brilliant DevOps, but with a team, you can do a way more. You can do more complex project, you can deliver quickly, and so on and so forth. Therefore, you have to have to rely on the team to make sure that you're not coding, but kind of achieving the same things even faster than you would have done it them yourselves.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a change of mindset that has to happen, right? And if you've been an individual contributor for a long time, like it was my case, 20 years, it takes some time and some muscle, some mental muscle that you have to build to be effective at that specific skill.
I'm not sure if it's correct. On your LinkedIn, I saw that when you were in the position of manager, you still got your AWS certifications. Is it correct?
Yeah, exactly. I still got it.
But basically, they require lots of technical background. So was it a path for you to keep up with their technical knowledge, or was it something that you were willing to do, or like can you share this experience?
Yeah, so I have a bunch of certifications. Luckily, at Amazon, we expect everybody to learn and be curious and to keep up with the technology trends and everything that is happening out there, including AWS certifications. So I was able to dedicate some time of my own to study, because at the end of the day, even though if you are working day in and day out with AWS, you need to study because there is a lot of different cases, and the content is vast. Mm-hmm. Also, depending on which certification. For example, Solutions Architect Professional, that's probably going to be the most complex from my perspective. But there are some other specialty certifications, like, for example, security, that I got myself. So I thought that, especially when I was still for a frontline manager, it was a good way for me to stay up to speed, and also to show the rest of the team that this was important, that we had to keep up. How are we going to do or go to customers to say yes, that they should get a certification if we don't get it ourselves, right? If it's not important. So that was one of the approaches, right? But it still took time. And if I look, those certifications, if haven't expired for me, they're going to expire. And probably I will have to put a lot of time and effort, even more so, because I haven't been so hands-on for a while now. So yeah, but still, it's a great value in the market right now, all everything related to AWS and cloud technologies. And I think it's a good investment in everybody's personal development.
Yeah, I like how you put it, because it basically keeps your head busy with technical things. Not necessarily working on something, but kind of by learning, by studying their examples and their data, their I guess the tutorials that is there, possibly trying out something, but not on the production system. As far as I understood, you moved from the production system when you were a systems engineer so a long time ago.
Yeah. That's why sometimes it's very easy to talk about, deploying architectures, etc. But when you have to deploy them in production, that's a different story. So that's why we work, for example, very closely with partners, with our own professional services, everyone that is a little bit more hands-on and can help customers into the more the delivery of projects. And to make sure that everything that is on paper and looks very, very great on paper runs the same way when we put it and we operationalize it.
So you were managing a team of architects. You mentioned already one thing that you think is key or important for managing architects in particular is a technical background, technical knowledge. Is there any, or are you aware of any other important points that differ managing architects and managing a software development team?
Yeah, so I think and I've been, I haven't managed directly engineering teams, but I've been working closely with many different engineering managers. And I think as an architect, you need to have a more strategic and high level view of how all systems interconnect together. So as I said at the beginning, I think you need to have built a lot of technical knowledge and depth and understanding many of the problems that can arise of running those kind of systems at scale. But on top of that, you also have to be, and I think I mentioned this before, right? But you have to be able to connect the dots between business and technology and be able to communicate those effectively. Because when you are an architect, you have to kind of sell your ideas and connect your ideas with everyone in the company, in the organization, right? When you are in an engineering team, maybe your focus is a little bit more narrow and you work within your own engineering team, right? You don't have to sell anything to the business. Also, I think, the team composition is slightly different. In my team, for example, solutions architects have many different backgrounds. For example, I come more from an infrastructure background, but we have full stack developers. We have people that have been doing more networking and have been network engineers in large enterprises. We have people that come with the startup background and some people that have more of an enterprise background. Some folks come from professional services partners and things like that, right? From an engineering team, you see a little bit more of a program managers, full stack developers, kind of a little bit more specific, and they're delivering for a specific functionality or a specific service in a specific timeline, right? We as architects are working with many different customers sometimes at the same time, or many different teams within the same organization that have many different priorities. So we have to balance that priorities ourselves, and we have to make sure that we are delivering our, whatever they need from us in a timely manner. So it's a very different approach. And of course, I think, and this is one of the things that I like the most, which is creativity. I think essays need to be very creative and be able to think out of the box. Because sometimes, especially with the startups, you are trying to solve novel problems, kind of problems that are happening maybe for the first time, right? So you need to come up with solutions that are innovative, that solve that specific problem. And sometimes that's going to be, something fairly new, maybe a new technology that Amazon has not even yet developed, right? And maybe we have to put a specific software running in a EC2 instance, right? But if that's going to be the best solution for the customer, we're going to go down that path, right? So yeah, I think both teams requires a unique set of skills, but they are slightly different.
Is there something that you don't like about being a manager? Because I hear lots of positive things. There are lots of challenges that you mentioned. With all people being super busy, working with lots of customers, and is there something that you don't like about your managerial role, right? Not working with the startups, but about managerial role.
As I said before, overly positive experience for me. I love being able to work with different teams in different continents, with different cultures, with different backgrounds. I just love it, right? So if I had maybe to point one specific thing that I may not like as much, is when you have to be a little bit on the dark side and come up with enforcing certain policies that are sometimes hard, right? Probably the teams now in the wider Amazon are struggling with the layoffs, right? We are trying to assess our business. So, having to be the person in the dark side and delivering that kind of messages probably is not the most fun part of the role. But yeah, that's the role, right? You ask for the bicycle, now you have to pedal, right? So I embraced all of it. And I still believe that all of it in a whole is very, very positive, and I cannot wish for any better position, to be fair.
Gotcha. Do you miss anything from your technical past, like your architects or some engineering role? Do you miss anything? If yes, what do you miss?
Yes, I do. And to be honest, I ask myself if I would be able to do this job again. I hope so, because no one is 100% safe, right? I sometimes and I do it on my spare time. Maybe when I go on holidays, I just open the AWS console. I may launch some of our own workshops that we have published and made available for everybody, just to get a sense of getting things running together, getting the different services connecting efficiently. That simple task. I mean, you have this whole architecture, but you go one by one completing all these tasks, and eventually you have a whole running 100% architecture that follows all the best practices, and everybody could just put their data on top of and start benefiting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and another element, because I still engage with customers on a regular basis, but it's more on a C-suite level, kind of more business oriented, long-term oriented conversations, more strategic. So engaging a little bit more with the developers, with the DevOps teams, etc., and talking directly about their challenges and getting the feedback of the things that don't work so well. That's something that I missed a little, to be honest, right? I mean, I still hear those through my team, and I get these reporting mechanisms that we use on a monthly basis to hear the feedback from the customers. But having that direct conversations with the more technical teams on a more regular basis, I guess I miss it a little bit.
Yeah, well, I hope you can find some time for those things that you are missing, and I hope that once you find, they make you more happy, because you look really happy with their way you're working and with their position that you are, and that's really nice to meet such people and to talk to you about this position and about your journey and transition from engineer to manager. Is there something you would like to add, something that we missed in our conversation?
Yeah, no, nothing. I mean, just to close it up from my side, I would say that if you are an individual contributor, you've done a little bit of, let's say, maybe 8-10 years of technical, more hands-on stuff, and you want to explore because you are passionate about people, you want to help others be successful in their own careers, be more of a mentor, of a coach. Just take a leap of faith. I mean, I know it's out of your comfort zone. I know probably it's going to take a while until you find that comfort zone again, but it will get there. And the way we look at this kind of situations at Amazon is this is a two-way door. So if for whatever reason it doesn't work, you can always go back to your individual contributor role. So just give it a go. You may be lucky, as I was, and you find the work of your life and your passion. So yeah.
Nice advice. Thank you very much. If people want to reach out to you, Carlos, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm very happy to connect with you in LinkedIn. My username is Carlos Sanchiz, just by my name. And if you want to have a one-to-one conversation or any kind of career advice conversation, I would be super happy to have those. So feel free to reach out.
We'll put the link to your LinkedIn in their notes. So, dear listeners, if you want to reach out to Carlos and talk to him about, AWS, about management, I guess go just to LinkedIn and connect and see what Carlos shares. So thank you very much, Carlos. It was a great pleasure to have you. Very interesting conversation and insights about this specific managerial role. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alex, to make this possible. I enjoyed the conversation and wish to see you again soon.
Yeah, thank you. And dear listeners, before you jump off, don't forget to like and subscribe. More videos are coming soon on this channel. Thank you. Bye.